Hello and welcome to this lecture on Chapter 3 where the topic of the chapter is storage. Now let me begin by pointing out the difference between memory and storage. Memory is the volatile information inside the CPU and the RAM, which are the memory chips plugged directly into the system unit, topics we talked about in the previous chapter. When you turn the power off, you lose the information in memory, CPU and RAM. Storage is a long-term, non-volatile way of storing your data and information. And we have various options for doing our storage, and those various options are the topic of this chapter. So there are 6 learning objectives. First of all, to name the general characteristics of system storage, describe the 2 most common types of hard drives, what they're used for today, discuss various types of optical drives, how they differ from each other, discuss flash memory. So points 2, 3, and 4 talk about our 3 main categories of storage: hard drives, optical, and flash. Point 5, there are some others that are less common than those 3 big ones of hard drives, optical, and flash. And then point 6, what's a typical person need to be aware of with these. So this is a good chapter. Let's kind of go through this here. You need to read the chapter as well. This video will line up very well with your chapter reading. When we're talking about storage, the device itself gets a letter drive, so it might be C drive for the hard drive, an internal hard drive in your unit. You might get a D drive for a CD or DVD player if you have a player or a burner, the ability to write. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You can plug a USB thumb drive in, or some other type of external drive that can plug in through a USB. Each device, each storage device will get a unique letter. You might even use network storage or cloud storage, and that would have its own unique letter. There's nothing magical about C, D, and E for those letters. It's just historically done that C drive is typically the hard drive, and you go sequentially up through the devices as you plug them in. Sometimes network drives have some of the higher numbers, but the main thing is that they are unique and unambiguous, because when you store to the C drive, you as the user need to know exactly which device you're storing to. So what are the characteristics? Well, the first characteristic, and the most important, is what I said at the beginning, that storage is non-volatile. And what that means is it's not based on electricity. You can turn the power off and not lose the data. CPU and RAM are volatile. On the motherboard, you're working on a research paper, the power goes out, you didn't save your work, it's gone. If you save a file to your hard drive and you turn the power off, you still have that file saved on your hard drive. You can come back to it immediately, you can come back to it 2-3 days later or a month later, and it'll still be there. Another characteristic when talking about storage systems is the idea of random versus sequential. Now, almost all storage devices are random, which means you can jump around as you load the data. It doesn't have to be one long contiguous file start to finish. But some storage devices do require this sequential, contiguous, non-stop access of the data. Tape storage is the most famous for that, and we'll talk about tape storage toward the end. It's not one of the big 3. Before we talk about tape, we want to talk about the big 3 storage systems. Big overview of storage, also trying to get the big picture. When you store a file, the file is what's stored, and that can be anything. It's stored in ones and zeros, whether we're talking about an image, whether we're talking about a video, whether we're talking about an audio file, whether we're talking about an executable program, whatever you're working on, the data for your program, the research paper you're writing for Microsoft Word, the spreadsheet you're building for Excel, the PowerPoint presentation itself that you're using the PowerPoint program for, all of that is stored in ones and zeros, and it's stored as a file. It has a file name. The file name has a file extension to tell you what type of file it is, and the location of the file is determined by the folder that has an entire path that begins with the letter being the drive or the device on which it's stored. So C:/my documents/ username/ the name of the file with an extension. So we do all of our file storing using this notation, at least with personal computers and Windows, and on the Mac that's the way it's done for all of those. So the files themselves are in a folder structure, and that gives us the ability to have hundreds or thousands or more files but not have to look at all of them at a time. So you can navigate through the file structure, and it actually becomes a nice way of organizing your data. Getting a systematic way of keeping up with your files and folders and using good folder names is something that can help you be organized moving forward. The quality of the image in this screenshot is not as good as the quality in your book, but if you look at figure 3.2 in the textbook, you can see you can read the text better in the book than you can see it on the screen here. So there are 3 big common types of storage, and then there's some other types of storage that we'll talk about at the very end of our lecture, but we're going to begin by talking about these 3 most common types of storage. Magnetic storage drives, which are what we use for our traditional spinning hard drives. Optical, like lasers on CDs and DVDs and Blu-ray discs, and electrons that we use on our flash memory, like a thumb drive or the little memory card that goes inside of your camera. So those 3 storage devices are the big 3. So let's look at these. Let's start with hard drives. Hard drives are the classic storage location. Typically C drive on a computer, C:/. You go from there. And the way hard drives have traditionally worked is they had metal platters that had magnetic material on there and a magnetic read-write head. And just like you can bring 2 magnets close together to read and they'll either be attracted to each other or pushed away from each other, that attraction or repulsion, it represents a 1 or a 0. So we can store 1s and 0s using magnetic values, positive and negative, attraction or push away values, to store data in magnetic format on spinning metal platters, and that's what a hard drive is. If you open up a hard drive and looked at it, you would see that it actually has these metal platters, and usually it's more than 1 platter. In the figure you can see that there's 4 platters. You can see the full platter on the top, and you look down the side like you're stacking a cake, you can see that there's 3 additional ones for a total of 4 platters. And on the top and the bottom of those metal platters are a special surface that can read and write magnetic material. There's a lever there for, I don't know if you can see this here, but this lever here is at the very tip of it, there's a very, very small, very, very sensitive read-write head. And it's able to detect if the magnetic value is a 1 or a 0, and it's also on command able to switch the magnetic value to a 1 or a 0 for a specific tiny spot on that platter. And these platter heads spin, so these platter heads are rotating very fast, like 7,000 revolutions per minute. And this read-write arm has an axis right here, and this read-write arm is able to move in and out based on this lever moving in and out. So we can read the tracks very close to the middle, and we can read the tracks all the way to the far end as the arm moves in and out and the platter spins. So some terms, I use this term track. There are some terms that we use with hard drives. The tracks are the concentric circles, sectors are pieces of the track, clusters and cylinders. I'll let you see this slide because it's just got the definitions, but I like this slide better because it shows us the definitions in the context. So on a given platter, there are a series of concentric circles called tracks. Think about a racetrack. You start and you end at the racetrack at the same location. Right? The start line and the finish line are the same, so that's why a track is a good name for it. But the track itself is broken up into smaller segments called sectors. And those sectors are grouped 1 or more to give you a cluster. So a file is too big for a single sector typically. So you need lots of sectors together. For a cluster of sectors is the file. And because this is non-sequential, those files can actually be broken up. The sectors don't have to be one after the other. The file itself can be many different sectors, many different clusters broken up, top and bottom, inside, outside, close to the middle, close to the outside, as we save our files. So it's a pretty sophisticated and classic technology, these hard drive read-write heads. But it's not the only hard drive option. Newer hard drives don't have spinning metal platters. They don't have a read-write arm that moves in and out. Newer hard drives use solid-state technology, and they're abbreviated as SSDs for solid-state drives. These technologies use the same thing that we use on our USB thumb drives, or little flash cards that we have for the memory sticks inside of our cameras or our cell phones. They use non-moving electronic technology. It ends up being faster, it ends up being more reliable, and at this point it's more expensive. A 500 megabyte solid state hard drive is going to cost you more than a 500 megabyte spinning platter hard drive, traditional magnetic hard drive. But it's also going to be more reliable because it doesn't have those moving parts. Hybrid hard drives are an option of trying to manage the difference in price. As solid state drive prices drop and get closer and closer to magnetic spinning platter drives, the need for this hybrid will go away. It's already becoming not as big of a deal, but you are seeing you'll still see some drives that have this hybrid combination mix. And what you do is you get the large storage at lower cost of the magnetic drive, but you get the performance increase of using solid state technology as flash or as a cache to deal with the speed buffer between the RAM that you're reading the information to and the speed of the hard drives, the magnetic hard drives. Your spinning hard drive will crash at some point. Even a solid state hard drive is possible to crash and lose its data. It won't crash for the same reason, but you're going to have to deal with the fact that the information stored on your computer is going to be lost, or it can be lost. So that brings up a number of related points. First of all, do you have a good backup for your data? Right now, is there a machine that you use that if it was destroyed in a fire, dropped and broken, or if it was stolen or lost, how put out would you be for losing that data and information, the files, the pictures, the programs, everything stored on that? You need to think it's worth the cost of using some cloud storage backup or having an external storage device that I plug into my machine and back up on a regular basis, or backing up to CDs or Blu-rays. Having a duplicate copy of your data to be prepared for the fact that your information might get lost. If the data gets lost, you can recover it, but it's very expensive. These experts working in clean rooms to deal with damaged data, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to recover the files and the photos on your hard drive if you lose it and have to send it to a repair place. And even then, it's not guaranteed that it's going to work. This is this type of process of recovering lost files is done more in high-end, high-expensive, high-cost situations where you're dealing with extremely sensitive professional data, legal files that you're in the middle of spending tens of thousands, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 in court costs and legal costs, and in that case you're willing to spend $2,000 or $3,000 to recover a file from a hard drive. But for just an average user, you're probably not going to be willing to spend that much money to recover some photos that you didn't back up. So back up your data. Hard drives can be internal, means they're inside the system unit or inside the laptop casing itself, or they can be external where you connect them to the unit or to the laptop casing through a USB connector or even through a wireless connection. The internal hard drives are very common. Devices have internal storage in them, but they're also limited in size, so there might be times when you want to have an external device. An external device is excellent for backing up data. So you can have a USB 3 that you plug into your computer, or a USB 2, which is slower, but you definitely have a USB 2 connector on your machine. You can back up your important files, back up your important photos, and do that through an external device. And the beauty of an external device is it's very portable. You can take it with you from machine to machine. Once you recycle a machine and get a new machine a couple years later, that external device will plug right into the new machine. You'll have your files and be ready to go. Hard drive partitioning and file systems is the last thing I want to say about hard drives. Just the idea that hard drives are now getting very large, 500 megabytes, even gigabyte hard drives, or 500 gigabyte, even terabyte hard drives are becoming common. So I don't need a terabyte hard drive. 500 gigabyte hard drive is probably more than enough, but I can take a large hard drive and I can break it into partitions. And there's some advantages to having partitions. So I've got one physical drive, but I can break it up to a C colon drive and a D colon drive, even though there's only one internal hard drive in my machine. And I can save some of the files on my C drive, like my operating system, and I can save other things on my D drive, like the data that I'm processing or my recovery information, to completely reboot the operating system if necessary. So something to look at is the possibility of working with partitions. And our book talks a little more about that, and you can read more about it online. It's actually something that I haven't gotten the habit of doing, but every time I talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that could be a good idea. But I end up not making advantage of the partitioning very much. I know some other people, faculty up and down the hallway here, and people outside in industry, that they use partitioning all the time. It's extremely useful if you're going to have a dual boot. If you want to be able to boot your program up into one operating system like Windows and boot your program up into another operating system like Unix or a Mac, then you definitely want to use partitioning for that, so that it's able to have both operating systems completely installed and ready to go. Okay, so we've talked about hard drive storage. Let's do a quick quiz up to this point. Of the following three options, the storage media that would most likely hold the most data: an internal hard drive, a USB flash memory drive, or a portable hard drive, the internal hard drive A is going to be the largest of those three choices, more than likely. True or false, hard drives typically contain more than one metal hard disk. That is correct. That is true. And number three, the circular rings on a magnetic disk in which the data is stored, they're called tracks. Like race tracks, you start and you circle all the way back around and you end at the exact same point that you're on, and round and round it goes. Okay, the second of our three main types of storage, all three of these are volatile. It means non-volatile, which means if you turn the power off, you do not lose the data. So that's why they're called storage. The second most common is, or at least the second one discussed in the chapter, are optical discs and drives, right? CDs, Blu-rays, and DVDs. I've got a couple of these comments marked out because the industry is changing very quickly, and the use of CDs, Blu-rays, and DVDs is being replaced for everyday personal use by cloud storage or network storage. Now, you'll still buy movies on DVD, although we're streaming more and more movies. And Netflix, their business of mailing DVDs and Blu-rays out to people is they're making less money on that than they're making on the Netflix streaming industry. So the whole industry is shifting as network technology is replacing CD, Blu-ray, and DVD as optical storage ways of doing technology. But it's still an option that we have. So we want to talk about it. We want to be aware of it. The idea on all three of these optical disc technologies is that they use a laser to bounce light off of the surface of the CD, DVD, or Blu-ray disc, and they're able to, by it being either jagged or smooth, that light reflects back either strongly or weakly, and the strength of the reflection is the 1 or the 0. So we're still storing ones and zeros, but we're not using magnets. We're using light and light reflecting, and how much does the light reflect back or not. Okay. Now, I've crossed out that it's a standard for software delivery because a lot of programs are downloaded without CDs. Certainly apps on your phone don't have CDs, right? They're all downloaded over the internet. And even now on newer operating systems on Windows 10, you can go to the Windows Store and you can get your programs downloaded. Microsoft Office is now a download. If you're using the Office 365, it's a download rather than a CD. Some software still comes on CDs. You can go to Best Buy and buy CD programs. Games still come on CDs. Movies still come on CDs. So it's certainly not an extinct technology, but network download is making the optical disc technology a little less strong than it was. And for backup purposes, yes, you can back up to a CD or Blu-ray, but I back up to the cloud, and most of the people I know use cloud backup rather than burning CD copy duplicates of our files. As I said, this uses a laser that bounces off of the surface, and the surface is smooth. The light bounces straight back. If you have a pit, the surface is, the light will go in there and it'll deflect and diffract and not come out evenly. So that's the way that we can store our ones and our zeros. The data on the track of a CD is not many concentric circles, but rather it's one long spiral that goes from the outside working its way in, kind of like an old vinyl album that you put on a record player, and you put the needle on the outside as it spins, and it works its way to the inside as it goes through it. But you still have sectors, and they're the same size as the sectors on your hard drive, or roughly the same size, and you still store your files as a series of those sectors. But it uses different technology, but it has the same result of being able to store ones and zeros. CD, DVD, and Blu-ray are our three main storage types. They can be read-only, recordable, where you record once, or rewritable, where you record many times. They're backwards or downward compatible, which means you can put a CD player into a DVD, and you can put a CD and DVD player into a Blu-ray player and be able to record those. Recording data on a disk is called burning. And again, they, just like hard drives, they can be internal, where they're fixed in the hardware, or they can be external, where you plug them into the system unit or plug them into the laptop, and then the externals are portable. You just unplug it and take it to another machine and plug it back in. As we look at optical discs and drives, those three types of optical disc, CD, DVD, and Blu-ray, we can see roughly the sizes that CDs are roughly 700 megabytes, and that there's some variability there depending on exactly the technology that was used and how compact it is, and are you doing on two sides of the drive versus one. DVDs are almost an order of 10. 7,000 megabytes would be 7 gigabytes if you added a 0 to the 700 megabytes, and it's in that range. And the Blu-ray disc is not quite, but almost more of an order of 5 than an order of 10, where you can increase those. But depending on the numbers there, you can kind of see if I go from 47 to 85, depending on the Blu-ray technology we're using, yeah, it would be an order of 10. So that's a good idea on how much the technology increased from each of those generations of storage. By the way, the word disk is spelled with a C when you talk about optical discs. So a hard disk is spelled D-I-S-K, and an optical disc is spelled D-I-S-C. There are read-only, which means you can only read the data, but you can't burn the data or change the data. That's how games are downloaded in movies, and this is probably the more common, or it's the one directional. It's not, you don't use this for backup. You use this to have your own physical hard copy of the program you bought or the movie that you're watching or renting out. You can get recordable discs. This is good for doing backups of your data, saving your program, saving your files, saving your data, saving your work, so that you have a backup in case your hard drive, your main storage crashes. They tend to be written CD-R, and the R means recordable. And then RW means read, write. Not only can you read, or it's rewritable even, you can write to it, and you can write to it again and copy over it. So this is a nice way of reusing the same media multiple times. And you'll see those extensions, RWR, on your material, and ROM, ROM, read-only memory, was the read-only option. The difference between the minus and the plus has to do with a different recording option. They tend to be compatible these days, where you can use a minus R or a plus R, but it is something you can be aware of and know what your machine is. Or if you have a rewritable or a readable disk, know if it's a plus R or if it's a minus R, and buy the discs that say that they'll work with that. So we've gotten through now optical disc, and here's a quick review. The capacity of a typical CD disc is 700 megabytes, B. True or false, a DVD rewritable disc can be written to and rewritten to. That's true. And 3, the tiny depressions, dark areas, or otherwise altered spots on an optical disc that are used to represent data, they're called pits. And a pit is not going to give you the same signal back that a flat, smooth surface is going to give you back. So it's just a way we store ones and zeros by our light bouncing on our data, light bouncing back. The third of the 3 big types of storage to go with our hard drives and our optical drives are flash memory storage systems. Again, it's non-volatile. You turn off the power, you keep the memory there. That's why it's called storage. It's non-volatile. This is a solid-state drives, SSDs, use this flash memory. There's no moving parts in flash memory. It's more like a microchip. And of the three storage types, this one ends up having the fastest data transfer because it's most like the CPU and most like the RAM, because those are also solid-state technology. So you can have good high speed with flash memory. It's one of the reasons that people like SSD drives, solid-state hard drives, more than they like the spinning platter hard drives, who are going to be faster. These solid-state storage devices are what you'll see, what exists in all of our really thin technologies. A really thin laptop will not have a spinning platter. It will definitely have a solid state, because a solid state can be smaller and thinner, and it makes sense because you don't have to have the motor and the mechanism of a moving spinning part inside your laptops, really thin laptops, inside your cell phones, inside your tablets. You're going to have solid state storage devices. As we look at our flash memory cards and flash memory readers, there's a number of them out there, and there's some verbiage about those. These are not compatible with each other. There's competing industries that were developed independently by different companies. So Sony uses one style for all their Sony products, which is something different than another company uses for all their products. So you'll see that there are a lot of these different types of flash storage cards that you can buy, and you just have to make sure that you're getting the one that you can use for your device. Now there are some adapters. I think there's a figure there on the left that shows us an adapter that lets you take one small storage and plug it in, and it'll fit into a larger storage device and be able to work. But this industry has not standardized the way that USB thumb drives have standardized. USB thumb drives are another example of flash solid-state non-moving part storage. If you take our thumb drive, and there's a picture of a Cruiser thumb drive, if you actually took the pieces off on that and just looked at it, you would see that the USB part that plugs into your computer, inside that little plastic casing, there's a little circuit board, and on that little circuit board there's a flash memory microchip and some other circuitry on the little circuit board for processing the data to and from the device that you're connected to using the USB connector. So there's nothing magic going on there. There's no spinning, moving parts. It looks like a RAM chip more than anything. It looks like something you'd see on the motherboard. Solid state technology, and you're just plugging it in using the USB to plug it in. True or false? Flash memory storage systems are non-volatile. That is true because all storage is non-volatile. That's what makes it storage. Right? Memory is volatile. Storage is non-volatile. The reason flash memory storage systems are called solid-state storage systems is because they have no moving parts. Right? Unlike a spinning platter hard drive that really has platters that spin, and even the CD, DVD, and Blu-rays have spinning platters and a laser that hits them. The solid-state flash drives don't have any moving parts. A type of sequential storage that is sometimes used today for backup purpose is magnetic tape, and really the key to that question is the word sequential. I haven't really said much about magnetic tape. I actually will say something about that again in a minute. I think that question might actually be repeated again later. But so the first two questions are good there. Let me say, let's forget the magnetic tape for now. I think we'll come back and see that again. Okay, so now we're in the home stretch. We talked about the three main types of storage that you need to know. There are other storages out there, and our book talks about some of these. Some of these may become very big in the future, some may not. One thing you'll see is your Western ID card and your credit card with a bank. Right now they have a magnetic strip on the back, and that magnetic strip stores information. It's more reliable and long-term. It's more reliable to have that information stored on a microchip rather than storing on the magnetic material, because the magnetic can lose its information very easily. Your fingers touch it and you can rub it off, and if it passes by a magnet, it'll lose its information. Storing the information on a little microchip it still can be thrown into a fire or run over by an automobile and lose its information, but just touching it or bringing it next to a magnet, it's going to be more reliable than the magnetic tape on the back of your Western ID and the magnetic tape on the back of your credit card. These are called smart cards when we start using circuitry to store information on the card rather than using magnetic material. And they can be used in a large variety of systems. They can be used for identification, they can be used for tracking purposes at a company to make sure the employees, as employee identification and so on. You can imagine a number of uses of having that information. Sometimes people talks about in the chapter, about using these devices to have biological information, health, medical information about the person can be saved on there, and a number of other things. Magnetic tape. So here we get to talk about magnetic tape as promised, although I probably should have talked about this before I had that question. The idea with magnetic tape systems is this was a big deal on the first computers, the first hobbyist machines and the computers in the 1960s and 1950s. When you go back and look at those old movies, they've got these large reels of magnetic tape, the size, the size of a basketball, but they're flat with just tape inside of them. You place them on a read-write. You place them on a machine that reads from one spinning thing to another spinning thing, and the magnetic tape is being read that way. It is a technology that has lost its popularity. It's not nearly as common. Most of you have never physically touched a magnetic tape storage system. And one of the reasons is that magnetic tape is a sequential access system, to where when you want to have your data, you've got to have one big, long, continuous block of to store all the file, or you can't store the file. Most modern storage systems, hard drives, optical, and solid state, allow you to do random access. They allow the data to jump around. The sectors can be very small, and they don't have to be contiguous. So that's more flexible, more faster, because if you want to read the file, you can go right to the sector that has the data you want and get to it. With a magnetic tape, if you've got a big magnetic tape and you want to get to a specific file, you've got to load the tape and you've got to move the cassette to the file that you want. So this is a bit of a dated technology, but it hasn't gone away because it serves a purpose in the business hierarchy, specifically low-cost long-term storage. Or if I want to low-cost sequential storage, if I want to back up an entire hard drive as part of my regular routine backup, and I want to do it with the idea that I'm going to once a year need to actually recover that data, a low-cost sequential option will work for me for that, because when I'm recovering an entire hard drive, I'm going to read it in order, in sequence. So it's going to give me a good option that way. But it's not something that you're going to use on a regular basis. RAID, this is a very cool idea, the idea of a redundant array of independent disks. So we know that a single drive is going to crash. We know that a single hard drive is not completely reliable. It'll last for a while, but it has some you wouldn't want it to be your only source of data. So one option is to have two disks and store your information on both of those disks. Well, another thing you can do, if I had two disks, I could save the same file across both of the disks and get an improvement in performance. So the fact that hard drives have dropped in price allows me to have multiple drives and do some creative things with them. I can improve performance, or I can decrease the risk of crashes, make my system more fault tolerant by using multiple disks. This idea of RAID, a redundant array of disks. And there's two main options for taking data. I can take the data and split it across two or more drives, and that's called striping. And that gives me a performance increase, because I can save the file by breaking it in half and saving it on both drives at the same time. You can think about that. It would actually take me less time if I coordinated that. It may not be half exactly, but it's less time. And I could read the data faster that way also. So striping takes one file and breaks it up over two drives and improves performance. Mirroring takes one file and copies the file identically, bit for bit, on both drives. That gives me improved reliability, because if one of the drives crashes, I've got all the data on the other drive. So if I only had 2 drives, I would have to decide, do I want to improve performance or do I want to improve reliability? Turns out that if I use more than just 2 drives, 3 drives, 4 drives, and so on, I can get the advantages of both. So RAID 0 is the striping, which is one file copied on 2 machines, improves performance. RAID 1 is mirroring, one file is duplicated on both drives, which improves reliability. But there's RAID 2 and RAID 3 and RAID 4 and RAID 5. You don't need to know what those are at this point, but if you're interested, you could read about those, do some Google, some YouTube on those, and there's some interesting ways of getting some high reliability and high performance by taking advantage of multiple drives instead of getting one massive 2 terabyte hard drive that's going to cost, be at the high end price. If I bought 4 500 gigabyte drives and plugged them into a RAID system, I could have good performance there. And Drobo is the one that's discussed in our book, and there's others out there that are companies whose their main goal is to make this RAID processing easy for users. So if you want a good performance and, more importantly, good reliability with your data separate from this hard drive inside your system unit but as an external storage device, RAID is an option for you to explore. Now that's more for personal use. What about for a company use? Right, what if we talk about within an organization or files being shared within your family on a home network? Well, remote storage is the ability to store things outside of just the hard drive inside your system unit. So if you had a RAID storage device, that would actually be a remote storage. And if it was plugged up to the network rather than be plugged up directly into the system, then everybody on the network would be able to share that remote storage. So that's network storage. Cloud storage is also a remote, non-local storage option, but it's saved by some third party that you access via the internet. So network storage is you set it up personally within your network, and if the internet goes down, you're okay. The network within your company can still access the file, and also you have physical control. You physically touch the servers, the hard drives, and you own those, and you don't have to worry about somebody else having the information. So privacy and security, network storage within the organization is a good idea. But from cost efficiency, if you just want to back up data and it's not mission critical, it's not worth $1 million on the open market if somebody got access to your files, cloud storage, letting some third party company store your data, is a great option. Network storage, you'll hear the term NAS for network access, network attached storage. If you used a external RAID system, for example, and had that plugged up to your system, that would be a NAS storage. It doesn't have to be RAID to be NAS, but a lot of them are. If you're going to take the trouble to set up your own network, it makes sense to set up a RAID system so that you have the advantages that we've discussed with RAID. Cloud storage, here you have a third party that's managing your files, and there's a huge number of these, and this is just growing like crazy. This is why I had lines through the optical devices as my backups, because the cloud storage is a great way to back up your non-mission, your ultra sensitive data. So websites back up information, Blackbox and Dropbox, and Google has their own storage, and Microsoft has their own storage, and Mac has their own storage, and everybody's letting you store large amounts of data for free or for a low cost, $10 a month, to have your information backed up. And this is fast changing, and it's something that if you're not already taking advantage of it, you probably want to take advantage of it. For example, on Blackboard, you may not know this, but on Blackboard, when you log into Blackboard, across the top there in red, there's an option called My Files. And you can click on My Files, and you can browse and upload files to your network remote cloud storage that Western manages for you. And then anywhere you log in to Blackboard, you have access to the files that you've uploaded. And you have a pretty large chunk of memory of storage that Western makes available for you for free through the My Files, which is available through WKU Blackboard, and you can get to it other ways as well, but that's the most common way that I get to it. So, heading toward the real wrap up here, what about the idea of large companies, right? So we're talking about storage for big computer, talking about storage for Google, we're talking about Dropbox or Western's My Files. That's not going to be a hard drive inside of a CPU, right? When you're dealing with very large storage systems, they have special hardware that's designed for that. These racks upon racks of storage devices that give you, so that one rack there at the top is 24 drives, 3 terabytes each, right? So you've got almost 75 terabytes of storage per horizontal rack. So you can have a huge amount of storage here. There's no monitor directly hooked up here. There's no mouse, no keyboard, right? You remotely connect into this. It's just a massive storage center. And it runs pretty hot, so you'll need to keep that cool. And companies that are doing this massive storage for us, Dropbox and Google Cloud and My Files and all those, these data centers for keeping up this massive amounts of data, this is an industry that's growing hugely, and companies are trying to figure out ways of doing this large storage and keep the heat at a minimum because they combine together and make the storage faster and smaller, and it's a big industry there. So our last quiz, and then we're done. An online photo sharing site is an example of, that'd be B, cloud storage. The fact that it's online is really the key there, that it's cloud-based. It might use RAID technology, probably does, but I don't know that for sure. Holographic storage is one of the things that our book talks about as some of the other ways that we might see storage in the future. I think the book talks about DNA storage. Who knows what's going to happen, but we're going to have more and more ways of non-volatilely keeping our information for the future. True or false, the smart card has an embedded integrated circuit. That should be single instead of plural circuit, not circuits. That's true. Right? So instead of a magnetic strip, it has circuitry on it for storing the information that you would have put on the magnet. You can have even more information, have it be smart and run a program as opposed to just being static data. And 3, and here's the question when I meant to ask this, type of low-cost sequential storage is magnetic tape. And didn't mean to ask that earlier. Here's where I meant to ask it. Okay. So the chapter goes into more detail, but that's the big picture there. That's what we're looking at. So read the chapter, take the look at the questions on the question material that's available there, practice exam, and good luck. See you all in class. Have a good day.